these strategies in turn will help us to kind of orient to time, place, person, get those cues of safety from our environment and help us to ground and tell our nervous system, right now, we are safe.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jodie Richardson, and this is Well, Hello Anxiety. In a world that often moves too fast, we're here to pause, breathe, and understand anxiety together. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share honest conversations, and uncover the science behind anxiety and well-being, all while creating a space where it's okay to not be okay. Let's continue this journey together. Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Harriet Iles. She's a psychologist. She's in Sydney, right next to Bondi Beach, is what we learned in our last week's episode. So after you listen here, please go back or feel free to jot back to last week's episode before you listen to part 2, because we're really building on what we spoke about. And towards the end of last week's episode, Harriet said something really profound, and I am going to quote you, Harriet, because what she said was that our psychological well-being is not dependent on the absence of stress or anxiety or the absence of those emotional challenges that are very human and very much a part of life. I love that you've shared that with us, because I think it's a really important thing for us all to really contemplate firstly and to really reflect on what you've said. And to know that, we often do sort of feel like life would be better if I didn't have any stress, if I didn't, we just had all of the good stuff. But that's not a meaningful life. A meaningful life brings heartache and pain and challenges, and a life full of beautiful experiences and achievement and opportunities and possibility brings uncertainty. I was just chatting with my hairdresser actually, and they had a really painful experience recently because they had to say goodbye to a beloved pet, their first little baby before their real, little two-legged ones came along. And, we get so much joy, but with the things that bring us a lot of joy, often there's these challenges. And so trying to look for a life devoid of those things is not going to be a life that is going to be as fulfilling. And obviously the psychological well-being that we're all striving for more of is not achieved through avoiding those things, but developing our capacity and developing our flexibility, developing our ability to be able to move through. And that often is very much related to our nervous system, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess it's just about keeping as well our physiology well regulated, healthy, and lifestyle practices will inevitably contribute to the state of our nervous system, which is also tied to other parts of our body, our immune system, our gut health and whatnot as well. So everything's kind of connected, hence why the importance of having a range of different tools and lifestyle practices to enhance our well-being every day.
That's it. And in last week's episode, you shared your 3 pillars for well-being, and we really talked about kind of really bookending the day with those predictable routines where we can really support ourselves, because often it's the middle of the day, we're at work or around others, that things can be less predictable. One of the things that I really want to talk about is the nervous system, because there's a lot of talk about the nervous system and the vagus nerve, and we talk about grounding and we talk about calming, but I'd like for listeners to understand what I really, really would love for you to do, Harriet, for us, please, is to help our listeners understand a little bit more, because as a psychologist, you're seeing patients all the time. You're sharing this education with your patients because we know that there are practices that we can use and put in place to settle our nervous system. Let's talk a bit more about what it is that we're working on here. Tell us a bit about the nervous system and why it's so important for us to be able to develop the ability to regulate and what it means to be regulating in the first place.
Big question.
I know, right? Just a little question to kick off things.
I mean, I'll make mention. I guess the key part here that's relevant for our discussion would be the autonomic nervous system, which is part of our nervous system that controls a lot of the automatic functions, such as things like heartbeat, breathing, digestion, blood pressure, and whatnot. And we've got our sympathetic nervous system. So think, in other words, mobilization. So that gets activated when we need to say run, fight. So think that fight or flight stress response. So that's when our body needs to react or move, and our heart rate will, and adrenaline and muscles and stuff will obviously increase and tighten and tense so that we're better able to do that. And then we have that parasympathetic part of our nervous system, which think that is like immobilization, stillness. Now you can have stillness with cues of danger still in your environment, and that could look like a freeze or a shutdown. You could have stillness with cues of safety in your environment, and that could look like you being in that state of calm and connectedness, right? So there are different states that we can be in, and often they are shaped by the signals that we're getting from the environment as to, are we safe or is there danger? A lot of the tools that we introduce to people to support, their so-called nervous system is tools that are going to help people to be aware of the different states that they're in, of the different, say, stress states that they're in. So fight or flight, freeze, flop. There's also that sort of people-pleasing state. I think we talked about that in another
Yes.
episode. But that's be aware of what state they're in, the triggers to that, and then look at ways to move through that stress and or the accompanying emotions like anger or fear or whatnot to come back into a state of calm and connectedness. So those tools being things like movement that actually really helps to shift, say, energy, stress energy. So movement could be really helpful if, say, someone is in that flight state where they've got this mobilized energy they need to move through. So movement could help with that. But then also if someone's in a bit of a flop, if they're kind of disconnected from reality, then little subtle movements could actually help them to kind of get back to that stability, that sense of, oh, I am here in this environment. So movement can also help in that state as well, just to orient someone to time, place, person. So that could just be wriggling your toes or holding onto an object and bringing someone back into the present. So things like movement, things like self-expression. So really articulating to yourself or to other people, what you're feeling, where you are. That sort of thing can really help. Dancing, singing, things that are going to allow you to really articulate what's going on for you, body and mind, as well as things that are going to engage and soothe your senses. Right, because our nervous system often will get those cues of safety through sensory input. So listening to music that can bring about that sense of safety, holding objects that can bring about that sense of safety, that say we have, positive association with, pets, seeing or being in certain places that are very grounding for us. In summary, some of the most common things that we talk about to support us to move through emotions, to move through that stress energy, could look like movement, could look like engaging our five senses and grounding in the present moment, could be through being with other people that we feel safe around, that we can almost like co-regulate with. So there's some ideas, some examples of things. And, there's no one thing that's going to be necessarily the thing. It might be a combination, or it might be one on a specific day and then another thing on another day. But it's just being really mindful that there are lots of different things that we can put in our toolbox. And I guess these strategies in turn will help us to kind of orient to time, place, person, get those cues of safety from our environment and help us to ground and tell our nervous system right now we are safe.
One of the things that really starts this process is understanding what state we're in to begin with, and being able to recognize what it is that we're experiencing, which can help us know what we might need. And you talked a little bit, you talked about the 5 stress states: fight, flight, freeze, flop, and fawn being the people-pleasing state. Can you, fight or flight, I think we're very familiar with that, aren't we? We know that racing heart, we know that changing breathing, the muscle tension, the sickness in the tummy, the trembling, the tingling. There's so many different kind of experiences. But what I feel when I experience fight or flight might be different sort of as to the next person, because there's a whole broad range of symptoms and signs. But my key messages are my breathing changes, and sometimes feeling really teary, like I can feel really like I could just burst into tears when I'm feeling really anxious. And I can go, right, I understand what's happening. This is anxiety. It happened to me in the supermarket. It was just so profound in the moment. I just was literally in one of the aisles getting Weet-Bix and felt so overwhelmed I could just cry. And I was like, what's happening here? And you start to sort of think, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh, this is anxiety. So I immediately used one of my senses, my vision, to look around and find and notice and name colours, and settled my nervous system enough to be able to do my shopping, and unpacked it a little bit later to sort of understand a bit more why I'd been affected that way at that time. But knowing what state we're in is I imagine part of the work that you do with your clients is to help them understand, what does fight look like for you? What does freeze look like for you? What does flop look like for you? Am I right in imagining that that's sort of part of the work that you do with clients, help them recognise when they're in different states?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, the recognition piece can take time. The recognition piece can be, for some people, the key thing, really. It's just knowing, oh, that's where I'm at. And leaning in with that kindness and compassion. That's part of being that interested observer. That's part of being that mindful, compassionate, empathetic witness, right? When we're that empathetic witness to ourselves, we then can help ourselves, support ourselves to move through that, use the tools to move through that, and come back to some sort of calm. Right? But yes, it is. It's the education piece first. It's mapping our nervous system. It's understanding what our common triggers could be for that state, what that feels like for us. And then going, okay, I think I'm in this. What do I need to move through it?
And knowing the triggers, that what you just said there is so important, because sometimes we're caught unawares. Life's unpredictable, as we know. And I could just be doing a cruisy drive to, meet a friend for a coffee, and something could happen on the road, completely unexpected. I can't prepare for that, because I didn't know that was going to happen. It's one of those unpredictable things that we don't expect necessarily. But there are other parts of our life where we do know that it's going to be very activating for us. It's going to be particularly difficult, don't we? And so it's this stepping back and being an interested, mindful, compassionate, curious observer takes a little bit of time. If we could all set aside a little bit of time regularly to, understand more about how we're responding to the events of our life. Some are predictable, some aren't. It might be one person that's in the office once a week that we know is difficult for us to be around. And so those times in our life when we know that things are going to be a bit more tricky, we can better prepare ourselves, but also be more mindful of the tools that we might need that might make a difference. And of course, the tools we can use depending on what's happening that's unexpected. But yeah, you use that word triggers, and it's true to say though, isn't it? Sometimes we're triggered and we don't know why.
And sometimes we are triggered and we don't know why, and that's okay.
Mm,
Sometimes there is something in the present that looks a little bit like something in the past, and we can't quite make that connection. And so it's just also accepting that we don't necessarily have to find that specific trigger. What
yeah.
we need to know is that we're in that state and how we can move through that and apply that tool to support ourselves to do that.
Mm. I love the way you said that. Something in the present looks a little bit like something in the past. And one of the examples that I've used when I'm talking to teachers about students and anxiety, an example that I'll use is that there could be a student in the class, and that student may have had a really difficult home life, maybe a new partner for mum who was a very unkind person and wore a particular, Lynx Africa, let's just say. Now, if you've got a teacher, that scent could be associated with a person in the past who was very unsafe. And that scent on somebody in the room who is a safe person but has that their sense of smell will pick up that scent, and something in the room that is present feels very much like something from the past, as you just said, and that can activate that stress response, but the child won't recognise that. There's not that conscious awareness of, I'm equating this with this. It's an activation, and of course, there's so much we don't know about the people that we spend time with, and it's just an example of how we can be activated in ways below our level of consciousness that bring the sensations, bring the emotions, bring the feeling, bring this discomfort. And like you say, it's okay not to know, but we can still learn what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that the key thing being that interested observer, giving ourselves that empathy, because a lot of the time we don't know what we don't know. So if we're experiencing these symptoms and we don't quite know what it is and it just doesn't feel good and we start to judge ourselves and criticize ourselves, that criticism, that judgment is then interpreted as another stressor, which then
Mm,
compounds symptoms. So a lot of the work that I actually find myself doing is on the interpretation of our symptoms. It's the anxiety about the anxiety. It's the criticism, the judgment, the shame about the low mood, as opposed to this is the low mood. Let's practice giving ourselves compassion. But for someone that's, say, been critical of themselves their whole life, that compassion, that takes time to build.
yes,
Yeah.
it does. And compassion's a word that has been woven through last week's episode. And Harriet, one of the things that you've talked about across last week's episode and this week's episode is that compassion. And for listeners who are curious to learn more, I recorded an episode with Dr. Kristen Neff, who is a global, probably the first and foremost leader in the area of the research in self-compassion. And the conversation that we had, the episode that we had, was profound, and I really invite you to go back and have a listen to that, because it's a really beautiful part of this conversation that we haven't got time to dive into now. But Harriet, we've run out of time, and I can't thank you enough, and I love talking with you. You always bring so many different insights and perspectives and such empathy and compassion for anyone that's listening and for the people you work with. Can you please share with listeners a little about Restorative Space Psychology?
Yeah, so Restorative Space Psychology, so that's my private practice. So we offer in-person appointments in Wallara, so quite close to Bondi Junction, Bondi Beach, as well as online therapy sessions, which can be accessed by anyone in Australia. So my area, my niche is working with anxiety, overthinking, and low mood. And my mission is really to empower people with that psychoeducation, tools, knowledge to help them to manage anxiety, to manage their mood, to manage overthinking and worry with more calm confidence and belief, and to just give them that, compassion and the tools to support their nervous system each and every day, and to obviously enhance the flexibility of their nervous system so they can move through stress, move through anxiety more efficiently. So that's what I offer there. And I also am moving into the workshop and event space as well, offering sort of workshops that look at different psychoeducation and focus on wellbeing. So yes, I offer the therapy services as well as now working in the education workshop space.
Oh, brilliant. Have a look at Harriet's Instagram and you'll learn more about the wonderful work she's doing. Please connect with her and follow her there, and reach out if you think Harriet could support you with your own mental health. Harriet, thank you. I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much again for joining us, and always, love talking to you and look forward to having you back as a guest again very soon.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for sharing this time with me on Well, Hello Anxiety. Remember, understanding anxiety is the first step to managing it. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Take things one moment at a time. Focus on what you can control and know that you are not alone on this journey. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. I'm Dr. Jodie Richardson, and I'll meet you right back here next week.